I'm Carla.
And I'm Keyes.
And we're the History Twins.
Welcome to our podcast where history is more than just dates and dead people.
Join us each episode as we explore the past through music and story.
All right. And who are we exploring today?
Arnold. General Benedict Arnold.
Ah.
And if you have been following our History Twins podcast so far, we have been doing like a song-by-song wrap-up of our musical version of what we call it, This Man's a Spy, which is the story of American General Benedict Arnold and British Major John Andre,
right,
and the treasonous plot during the Revolutionary War.
Right.
And
treasonous plot to turn over West Point. Yes,
exactly. So, growing up in the United States, no matter where you are, I was from Florida, and I've even heard of, Benedict Arnold. Like, don't be a Benedict Arnold. Like, to be called that is such an insult. It's to be called a traitor because he gave up the plans for West Point to the British. And as you like to say, I mean, if that plot had been successful, the British might have won, and
we'd all be speaking English.
Right. So your song in This Man's a Spy, you sing this song.
That's true.
And when we were writing this song, well, actually before that, when we were just like researching Benedict Arnold, we got more of the background of Benedict Arnold, and the song is Arnold's Lament because you sing the song so honestly, so poignantly, so heartfelt, to explain possibly why he did what he did.
Well, it didn't start out that way. My plan was to write a comical song about his. It was going to be called Arnold's Gripe, if you remember.
Oh, yes.
And I started researching and writing, and it took this sympathetic turn of it wasn't enough. I did this, and it wasn't enough.
Isn't that interesting how a song can take you through that? I mean, we're both songwriters, and we often, before we started writing about history, we would write about songs about, from our own perspectives or stories that we could sort of see. But when we're writing stories about, or writing songs about someone else's story, and then you dig deep into someone else's story and you think, wow, I hadn't thought of it that way.
Right.
So how did you feel when you felt that shift go from his gripe to his lament?
I was surprised. Sometimes a song takes a turn, and it sort of does what it wants. And I was also a kind of part of me was like, can we do this? Because as you said, you always hear such bad things about Benedict Arnold.
Yes.
And then I thought, well, it's kind of cool to turn him into a sympathetic character and sort of give some insight as to why someone might do this.
Yes. But having said all that, when I did the other research and other, things about Benedict Arnold, I see why people feel so strongly about that. But again, as you often say, when Benedict Arnold gave up those plans, America wasn't America.
Right.
It was a bunch of colonies. What'd you call it? It was a batch of.
We were English colonies.
Yeah, and when they weren't a whole entire. They weren't a solidified country yet.
Even after the war, when the Constitutional Convention met, they were debating whether to become one nation or a group of small nations like Europe, for instance. So it was not a given that there was going to be a United States of America.
Right. So, the colonies, the colonists were really up in arms about how they felt that they had been mistreated by Britain and all these different taxes and all these other restrictions that were placed upon them. And then these little skirmishes started before the Declaration of Independence was drafted. There were all these little skirmishes and battles and things happening, and I think part of General Benedict Arnold's issue was that he was probably tired.
Yeah. At this midpoint of the war, it was just slogging on. It wasn't anything decisive happening until, of course, the Battle of Saratoga, which was decisive. But still, he just wanted to bring the war to an end. He said this actually in a letter to General Washington after it was all over, after the plot, after he had escaped and after he had turned coat. He was trying to explain to Washington why he had done this, that he still had his country's best interest at heart. And what do you say about that? I'm like, okay.
It's like, if you say so. So just a quick recap. If this is your first episode that you're tuning into, so it's Revolutionary Wars happening. General Benedict Arnold is on the American side. He is fed up with being passed over for promotion. He had given all this money to pay his own soldiers.
He was the hero of Saratoga, but no mention of that was made.
Yeah, he didn't get any credit.
Didn't get credit.
And then the Continental Congress and the Pennsylvania Supreme Executive Council, they had brought charges against him. And this guy, the president of the Executive Council, Joseph Reed, he brought multiple charges against him for shady business dealings and abuses of power. So, he had, at this point, Benedict Arnold was the military governor of Philadelphia, and he probably had it, and he'd been wounded in the Battle of Saratoga. He was walking with a cane and a limp.
Effectively crippled, yeah.
Yeah. He was crippled for the rest of his life, basically. And he said, "You know what? I'm good. I'm good." So
I'm out.
he is in Philadelphia now. He decides to court spark and marry the most eligible female young woman of Philadelphia, the Peggy Shippen of the Shippen family, one of the wealthy families in town. And she's 18. He's like
36,
late 30s. Yeah, he's late 30s. She's 18. And I think he's like, you know what? I'm done. You know, so for me, I when I think of Arnold's Lament, I think of Arnold just being tired. And just like, you know what, I'm done with this. I'm not getting any respect where I am. So I think it's time for me to work with the British. His wife, Peggy Shippen, her family were loyalists or neutralists, however you want to look at that. And if you listen to the last episode about A Woman's Wiles, we also find out that Peggy herself, was involved. So there's a lot of different forces at work, I feel, that make Arnold say to himself, you know what, screw this. I'm tired of this. I'm done. I'm, whatever. So here it is, a month later, a month after getting married, he reaches out to the British side and he says, I'm ready to do business with you all. And then while this is also going on, he's also lobbying with George Washington to say, hey, my leg is healing. Instead of doing a battle, how about you just give me like this office job, and well, not really office job, but give me the command at West Point, where it's not a battle command, but it's a good use for my talents, and I'm looking out for this side. And tell us again, what was the importance of West Point?
Well, West Point was at a critical portion of the Hudson River in New York, and the Hudson River was the gateway to the north, to all the northern colonies. But the river is very wide and very strong, and it's wide enough that you could sail a ship up it, and cannons could be shot from the side, from the banks, and still not reach the ship. But West Point, the river gets narrow, and the point is on an overlook, and you can fire down into these ships, which have to slow down anyway. And not only that, but they also built this huge iron chain, 65-ton iron chain, that they put across the river to stop ships from coming. So it was strategically very important. Whoever controlled that fort would control the entire Hudson River. Now, the British were already in command of New York City, which is at the bottom of the Hudson River. So if they got complete control of the Hudson River, that would have been the end of the war.
Wow. So Arnold knew that. He knew that. And didn't you say earlier that What did Washington say? Like that was his fighting general.
Washington called Benedict Arnold his fighting general. Yeah.
Yeah. So he was really strategically just a very smart, very knowledgeable about what he was doing, and so he also knew what he was doing when he decided to turn code and say, hey people, hey British people.
Yeah, he knew that if he gave up West Point, that would.
Yeah.
He knew two things about that. If he gave up West Point, that would spell the end of the war in favor of the British. But also, he knew that if he had command of West Point, the British could not refuse an offer of his. That was too great a prize to ignore. So, that those were two aspects to that.
And speaking of prize, like how much was he wanting to sell that secret for?
He was asking for £20,000.
20,000 pounds. Now, also, didn't you tell me something about we don't think he really got that much in the end.
In the end, he got £6,000.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. But, but in his mind, he was, that line in your song, the glory, the money, the fortune, the fame. You paint this really amazing picture of Arnold wanting to change his life. He wanted things to go better for himself. And he was just like, and you hear it. And if you're not thinking about, where the story fits in history, if you're just listening to the person telling their story, you're like, oh man, that's really rough. Oh man, that sucks. But then of course when you know what the story's about and you're like, but I really do feel that you give him a very sympathetic tone. By the way, let's listen to that song. Okay. Yeah.
Wasn't enough. I won Saratoga, which brought you the French. It wasnwasn't enough that I never got credit, just put back on the bench. It wasn't enough that I was wounded and bleeding, with the British retreating, my heart barely beating. It wasn't enough. And what did I get? Asked for promotion time after time. And what did I get? Watching my juniors get ahead in the line. And what did I get for the money I gave to the cause? I'll take what is mine, go where I'm wanted. I'm crossing that line, I'll go there undaunted. I've got the plans right here in my hands. Will that be enough? The glory, the money, the fortune, the fame. Will that be enough? The whole British Army applauding my name. Will that be enough? I know they'll be as grateful as Congress was hateful. Will that be enough? I'll take what is mine, go where I'm wanted. I'm crossing that line, I'll go there undaunted. I've got the plans right here in my hands. I'll take what is mine. Will that be enough?
Wow.
Oh.
You put your foot in that.
Oh,
Jim.
thank you.
Put your foot in it. That's a Southern expression. That means it's really good. So, so let's talk a little bit though. Now that we've talked about all the things that made him sympathetic, now we're going to talk about the aftermath of General Benedict Arnold, because for one thing, he was involved in the plot where he met with British Major Andre, and British Major Andre ended up losing his ride, the ride that was supposed to he was supposed to come on the Vulture,
return on a ship called the Vulture.
But
long story short, the ship was fired on by a militiaman named Rifle Jack Peterson.
We'll be hearing more about him.
We'll be hearing more about him later. And the Vulture had to leave, and that was John Andre's ride.
Yeah.
So he was now stranded.
Yeah. So he came back to Benedict Arnold to say, "Hey, I'm stuck here. What do I do?" So one of the first things he does is he Benedict Arnold says, "Hey, put on these civilian clothes."
Well, we can talk about all that in our song of the.
Oh yes.
So let's get back to what happened to Benedict Arnold after the war.
Yeah,
or
absolutely.
during the war, after he changed sides.
But just to say though, after this meeting led to a chain of events, and Andre missed his ride.
Right.
But Benedict Arnold himself was able to get back to British lines on that same Vulture ship. Right.
So John Andre was caught in Sleepy Hollow. He was tried as a spy and he was hanged. But Benedict Arnold was able to get away on the same ship that John Andre was supposed to get away on.
Yeah, which is so unfortunate.
Twist of fate.
A twist of fate. But you know what? After that meeting happened, everything I feel just went downhill for both of them. So after Benedict Arnold found his way to England, I think was it months later, he went back to New London. Wait, where did he went back to Connecticut. And so the next year, so after Arnold escaped to New York City, the next year, 1781, Arnold took his new British command to burn New London, Connecticut.
Ooh.
Now, we had mentioned this already, but Benedict Arnold was his hometown was Norwich, Connecticut, 12 miles away.
Wow.
So not only did he turn coat, and he went back to like his almost hometown, and he looted, like he knew that there was a large stash of military supplies there.
Right.
So they looted the town, and he ordered his British soldiers to set fire to every single building in that town, and that caused the equivalent of about $500,000 in damage.
Well, yeah. I mean, that might be even more reason to dislike him.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, but there's more.
There's more.
There's more. And by the way, I should mention, after all of those hopes and dreams of going to England to find his fame and fortune, because British Major Andre was so well loved, the British didn't like him. They did not like Benedict Arnold.
Also, he just wasn't trustworthy. He changed sides.
They're like, you can change sides.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, no one's going to trust
you.
you.
Can't switch back or betray something else.
Exactly. So the Arnolds, both Benedict Arnold and his wife Peggy Shippen, they were despised. And so after going to all that trouble to make those plans, the English didn't like him.
Right. And
then also, I think there was one part they went to Canada, and there were protests there as well. So like people did not like him. Like mobs showed up to have a fit, which is wow, which is really bad. But it's also really funny how after this happened, his name was like systematically removed from different places. Listen to this. So October 4th, 1780, which was like what, a month later, 2 months later, after let's see.
After John Andre was hanged?
Yeah.
2 days.
Is that? Oh, that's right.
He was hanged on October 2nd, 1780.
Wow. So 2 days later, the Continental Congress struck Benedict Arnold's name from the record of general officers serving in the Continental Army. They're just like, nope, don't know him, don't know this man. And then in West Point, they have an old cadet chapel, and there is a plaque in honor of his military accomplishments that hangs on the wall. But it only lists his dates of birth and his death, but not his name. So when you see it, it's like this shield-shaped plaque. But then where the name should have been, it's like, I mean, it's done really nicely, I suppose. But they basically scraped the name, so you don't know. If you don't know, you don't know. And the curator there, Michael McAfee, the curator of history for the West Point Museum, he says he was there. Basically, by doing that, they're saying he was there.
Benedict was there.
Yeah, yes, the Benedict Arnold was there, but he dishonored his own name, so they removed it. So I think that's really interesting. So there's a plaque saying that there was someone here that did something, but we're not telling you who he is.
That's true.
Then, what about the boot monument? I was
going to say the same thing. The
boot monument. That's hilarious to me.
Battle of Saratoga. There is literally a stone with a boot carved into it, and it is to commemorate the things that Benedict Arnold did during the Battle of Saratoga, but they don't mention him. And the reason for the boot is that he had gotten shot in the leg, and his horse had been shot out from under him, falling on his leg and breaking it, the same leg that had been shot. So they decided to honor the one part of him that was involved, and that did these heroic things, but not to honor the rest of them. So his name isn't even on it. It's just a boot. Just a boot.
That is so funny to me. And that was erected in 1887. And that's at the Saratoga National Historical Park. Now, didn't you say he had been previously wounded in that same leg in Quebec?
Yeah.
So they're just like, we can't give him any credit, but we'll give it to his boot.
We'll give it to his boot.
That is so funny to me. Now, I learned something else another thing. So, there had been the Daughters of the American Revolution. They had made a plaque that commemorated the 16 American generals that had participated in the battles of Saratoga, because there were actually two of them. One was on September 19th, 1777, and another one was October 7th.
Right.
So between those two battles, there were 16 generals. And the Daughters of the American Revolution made the choice to include his name. But when they brought it out because of his defection, because of
his treason,
there was a lot of controversy that was stirred up, and so they removed it. So in about, I think, 2001, 200 years after his death, the Saratoga National Historical Park, they did have an exhibit, and it featured a plaque that bared his name among the other people. So there's this one with all the 16 generals. It came back out in 2001, and it says here that the plaque was probably the only marker on federal land that bears his name.
Wow.
That's really how much they just didn't like him. So wait, there's still other places where they to tell you how much people did not like him. So in his hometown of Norwich, Connecticut, the words "was a traitor" they appeared after his name in the city's handwritten birth records.
Oh, wow. So they went back and wrote in "was a traitor." Oh.
So like that means someone going back into your birth records and someone said "was a traitor." Yeah. So that means it's there forever.
Wow.
In handwritten. But speaking of Norwich though, there is this man by the name of William Stanley who was a Norwich, Connecticut native. He was a former state senator, and he is someone who really believes still in the memory of what General Benedict Arnold was trying to do.
Or what he had done before.
Before
turning pro.
Right, exactly. So in 1948, he wrote a paper and turned it into high school. So he wrote a high school paper in 1948 that said that Arnold's military accomplishments made him the most valuable American who ever lived.
Wow.
Do you know he was suspended from high school for that?
Whoa.
I was like, wow. So Mr. Stanley since then has been organizing different seminars on Arnold, and he even played the role of Arnold in some kind of mock trial to sort of, because he's trying to rehab the reputation. But I don't really think you can. I mean,
no, I don't think you can.
I mean, goodness gracious, Arnold went back, just the fact that he went back to like near his hometown and burned down stuff, like that's really hard to forgive.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah. And so, well, what else happened to Arnold post-war? So we said he thought he was going to get 20,000 pounds. He might have only gotten 6,000 pounds.
Yeah.
So what he ended up doing was he finished the war as a retired British colonel on a half-pay pension, not even a full pay.
Right.
So after everything, he's still only getting a half-pay pension. So he was unable to obtain a regular commission in the British Army. So he turned to business ventures.
Right.
And he tried a few different things. He did land speculation in Canada. And he returned to England in 1791. But he left again to spend several years privateering in the West Indies before he permanently settled in London. So, privateering means he's like selling
It's a shade above piracy.
Yeah, just a shade.
It's a gray area.
Yeah, very gray area. And he died heavily in debt in 1801. And his wife, Peggy Shipman, had to like auction off all his stuff, and she died a few years later, 1804, from cancer. So it just,
well, they
crime
think
doesn't...
it's cancer. They don't...
Right, exactly. What they think is cancer.
Speculating that it's cancer.
Yes, absolutely. So, crime doesn't pay, folks, especially treason. You get caught, and so it's such a, it's such a sad story that once that meeting happened, both of their fortunes just fell.
Yeah.
So there were no winners here.
No.
None whatsoever. So, it's a fitting sad song, because when you hear the song, you can feel sort of like there's some hope that Arnold had. He had some hope that things were going to get better for him. And then when we look back at history, and you're like, that's not exactly...
Didn't work out that way.
Didn't quite turn out as planned.
Yeah.
So that's the tale. That's the lament of General Benedict Arnold.
And now that you know.
You know.